Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to wait just a few moments for others to sign on before we get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's weekly Facebook Live series of Family Houston. We're here every Thursday at 7 o'clock p.m., and I hope you'll join us each week as we talk about relevant and meaningful topics. Tonight, we're going to be talking all about children's mental health. I'm Shelly Long, the Manager of Communications, and will again be your moderator for tonight's session. I hope you've been tuning in to our previous lives and know a little bit about Family Houston. But if you don't, just to give you a quick overview, we provide mental health counseling, financial and employment coaching, and case management services to children, families all across the greater Houston area. Now, before I start asking our guest questions, if you have a question that you would like answered about children's mental health, you can message us privately here on Facebook, or you can leave a comment on the video, and at the end of the segment, Tanya will answer them for you. So tonight, I am joined by Family Houston senior clinician Tanya Van Dam, who earned her undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in counseling psychology. She has been practicing for almost 13 years and recently received certification in play therapy. So welcome, Tanya, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Hello, welcome, thank you.
So Tanya, let's start off with something maybe a little simple for everyone. Do you think you could share some of the common mental health disorders that can be seen between children or be seen in children and adolescents?
So the most common diagnoses that are seen or identified in children are anxiety, which includes separation anxiety, social anxieties, phobias. We also have depression, and then we also have our autism and neurodevelopmental disorders that can also be seen, as well as ADHD. So those are some of the most common. That does not mean that children cannot have diagnoses of post-traumatic stress disorder or tics and things of that nature. They're just, these are the ones that we typically would see develop within a child.
Okay. So now, I know this can vary drastically depending on the age of the child, but what are some tips that maybe parents or guardians could use to explain what mental health exactly is to a child?
Depending on the age, you can be as simple as recognizing that a child may be having difficulties. Say, for instance, if you have a 6-year-old and they are having some difficulties leaving their parents or grandparents, and you recognize that. Sometimes talking to them about how they get so upset and helping them to see the behaviors that they are you're crying, you're very scared to leave me. That is a good way to start a conversation about mental health with a younger child, helping them to see what they are experiencing is normal, and that it is explainable, and that someone can be there to help them. With the older children, teenagers, you can be very frank with them, and you can tell them, there are things like anxiety, and lots of people have it, and there are specialists who can help you learn how to deal with it better. So just depending on the age of your child, being able to just recognize what they're experiencing and letting them know that that is normal and that there is something called mental health and people out there to help.
I think that's really important for all of us to know, and to make sure that, we do talk about this with children and try to help end the stigma, that I know still goes along with mental health. How does someone maybe know if their child could benefit from therapy?
I would typically say that anyone can benefit from therapy. It's one more support person in your life or in your child's life, so there's always benefit. And a lot of times, sometimes if it's a more mild problem, you can see a therapist for a handful of sessions in which you as a parent as well as your child can learn different techniques or get some what we call psychoeducation about what's going on, because education is powerful and it can help you remove that stigma that you mentioned earlier. But if it's a more significant problem, one that's been going on for a little bit longer, long-term therapy is always available. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it's a good reminder that, you don't have to have just had some big traumatic event happen or some major life change to go to therapy, that it really is just another person to support you. I think that's a great way of explaining it, Tanya. So I saw early in your bio, as I mentioned, that you are certified in play therapy. People might not know what that is. So do you think you could maybe define it and talk about who could benefit from it?
Absolutely. So play therapy is what we would call another intervention. So intervention is just a type of therapy that we utilize, and play therapy uses a child's natural language of play to help them process what they're experiencing. I have adults that come in and may not always have the words for what they're experiencing or how they're feeling, and I can help them work through that. With a child, it's even more complicated because they don't have the large vocabulary that an adult does. So using play with specialized toys to allow a child to experience or recreate their own experiences or their feelings allows them to tell a therapist who is specialized in play therapy what is going on for them. So it's another way of communicating, and it can also be used to broach a problem or a situation, or even teach. So like social skills can be used and taught in play therapy.
Interesting. And what does it mean, like, when you're certified in it? Is it like, how long is the certification process, or that kind of thing?
So play therapy, as I said, was an intervention, but it is a specialized intervention. So therefore, in order to get certified in it, you have to do 150 education hours, as well as 500 supervised hours of play therapy. And then there is a board that manages all of that, and you're able to get your license specifically in that. So when you're looking, it may be helpful for you to know whether or not someone is trained in play therapy, which many people may be trained in play therapy. It does take a long time to get your license. So they may be trained in it, but not certified. And then there's the person who will be certified, and that just means that they've completed all of the requirements.
Okay. I think it's a good way to realize, I mean, that's a lot of time and a lot of training that goes into it. So
yes.
I imagine it's almost, it's like another language for a kid to be speaking to. So it's probably a lot to understand there.
Yes.
Now, talking about some of those things that kids might be suffering from, whether that be, anxiety or some of the physical ailments that they could be talking about to their parents about, maybe like I have stomach aches and that kind of stuff. And maybe with that, people might use different terms of how to assess the child and what they might be dealing with, such as testing, screening, assessment, evaluation. I think a lot of those terms might be thrown around a lot. Do you think you could maybe break down some of those and help a parent understand, when a healthcare professional is using some of those, what they might be meaning?
Yes, absolutely. So it can get very confusing. Mental health is obviously different than our physical health. They do overlap quite a bit, but they are different. If there are certain tests that a medical professional can provide that will tell you that, yes, you do have the flu. There is no test that someone can take you to a doctor and say, yes, you have depression. However, there are assessments, which is a list of questions, or what we would call a differential diagnosis, in which they would ask you, what are your experiences? And if you have a certain number of experiences, then we can determine, yes, you're having this set of symptoms, therefore you are more likely to have depression, versus you're having this set of symptoms, which is anxiety. Now, there's also a longer evaluation, which is typically done by a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they will ask all of those same questions as well as get a very thorough psychosocial history. That is, what have you moved lately? Are there any changes within your family? Is there a family history of mental illness or substance abuse or things of that nature? So it's a very detailed evaluation of all factors. And then there are also I guess it's a form of testing or evaluation, which is typically the word that we will use. And that is if we wanted to find out if a child has or is on the autism spectrum. There is an evaluation that is done, and it covers several different domains, and they are basically tests. They ask several questions. They ask them to do many things. And so those would be more of an evaluation that would be kind of a written or experiential test that we can do in order to find out whether or not there are deficits. So hopefully that helps.
No, that definitely helps break it down of all those different terms and kind of maybe how they kind of stack up, with each other. So since, during this time, a lot of us are online more often than we used to be, and I'm sure even before this, we were all online more than we should have been. Online bullying has been a long time a large issue, but even with more people online right now, I imagine this is something that parents should be paying even closer attention to. What are some things parents can do to try to prevent online bullying, or what are some safeguards they could kind of put up to help their kids with this?
It is going to be more of an issue because we are allowing our children to be on the internet more, and we're not always going to be right around their shoulder. If we are expecting them to be in class, then they're going to be a lot of times unsupervised, whereas typically we might be a little bit more watchful. So it is easier for a bully or a predator to kind of latch on and do some bullying virtually. So it is a lot of times checking in with your child, noticing if there are any changes, especially if it is revolving around their time spent on the internet, if they seem to be having more of difficulty after classwork or when they've had to spend a lot of time on the internet, to make sure that they're not, it could be virtual fatigue, but it could also be that they are encountering negative reports or feedback from their peers or, Lord forbid, strangers. And so checking in, often asking, noticing when there are sudden changes with your child, and then also just making sure that you are putting up as many of the firewalls and the guards as possible. I know lots of parents already check their child's phones or, their browser history and things of that nature. So maybe doing that a little bit more frequently. And then talking to your child about the fact that this is something that is happening, that it is very easy, that it's not their fault, and that if it is happening, that they need to tell somebody.
Those are really great tips, and I think honestly, even adults see online bullying, and we could definitely use those too. And a good reminder for all of us behind our keyboard to be a little kinder to everyone. I'm gonna touch on something that you just brought up about virtual fatigue. So I know, kids have been playing with their kids or their friends online, and many have been doing school virtually. And so for some of these kids that might be facing virtual fatigue, could you maybe talk about what that is and maybe some activities that parents can do with their kids to give them a break from this?
So virtual fatigue is more common these days. I guess maybe it's more of a pop word, that it is that as we are on these screens more often, doing regular communication, we have to read all of the nonverbals as well as listen to all of the verbal communication. With the screens, we are now also having a lot more extra mental strain on us because I'm watching myself right now. Things like that. You're watching, you're looking at the backgrounds, you're trying to make sure that you're not doing other things, and it becomes much more exhausting. And then you add into the nuances. For instance, a lot of my kids have complained that, some of their classmates may not mute their mics. And so then there's a lot of background noise, and it's harder to drown out because it's in your face. And so there are those nuances that are added in with particularly classroom work, and having to do those things. And so it just makes us more mentally tired. Physically, a child may seem like they have all the energy in the world, but they may mentally be drained. You may see an increase in frustration, a increase in irritability and lowered frustration tolerance. So asking them to complete tasks after their schoolwork may be harder for them. They may be a little bit more snappy. So I think a big piece is parents be compassionate to this. This is very different for them. And also, children are social. They are way more social than us adults are. And so we have removed that from them for their own safety, but we have removed it. And so they are not getting the release that they would typically get from school and being social. And so you're going to find that they may be a little bit more irritable, or they may feel like they need to spend more time on the computers because that is the only place that they can talk to their friends, or the only place that they can see them. And they're needing that, and they know that it works for them, but it's not working the same, and they may not be able to understand that. So compassion from the parents is going to be huge. But then also engaging them, getting them to play a game with you, taking them outside and playing, shooting some hoops or going for a walk together, things of that nature. So really trying to take initiative and really spend a little bit more face time and one-on-one time with your child would really be helpful for this virtual fatigue.
I think that's great. And I think too, a lot of adults might be actually kind of seeing this because it's summer or almost summertime, and usually, many of us might be hitting the beaches or going to all these water parks, and that might not be as feasible right now. And so I've actually seen that those inflatable pools are sold out. They're the new toilet paper. So I went through, I think, 4 different stores last weekend to get one, and I finally found a 10-foot one. So that's what my boyfriend and I are going to be doing this weekend, getting away from the screen and sitting in the pool. So Tanya, if you want to come hang out and sit 6 feet away from me, you totally can. I think I have one more question for you, and then I'll take a look at the audience questions. What are the roles that parents have in their children's mental health, and what are some things they can do to provide their children with healthy skills to better manage some of those problems you talked about, such as anxiety, social pressures, maybe self-esteem problems, which without addressing those could lead to more serious mental health issues down the road?
So I think a big piece, and kind of like I mentioned as well with the virtual fatigue and the bullying, is making sure that you're keeping that communication open with your child. And sometimes that is incredibly hard because they may tell you something or say something that is hurtful or you don't really want to hear. And that is one of the hardest things for a parent, is to hear something from their child that is hard to hear, but they need to know that you are the person that can handle it. And so being that open, making sure that that communication is open so that the child can come to you, and knowing that if they have an issue, if they are starting to feel body shame issues, or they are being bullied, or they just kind of feel sad and they don't know why, they need to know that they have someone to go to. Making one-on-one time, making special carved out time for your child. And that's from ages, 1 to 16. And if you can keep, a lot of times we get to this place where we think adolescents are on their own and they don't want us to be around them. But that's just not true. They really do need us there, and they really do want us there. They're never going to admit it, but they do. And so making sure that you make that time or find an opportunity to kind of have, a date night father-daughter date night or
Oh,
mother-daughter date night or mother-son date night, to where it's let's go do this specific thing together, will be really positive, because then they'll know that you're on their side and they'll feel more open to speak to you. And it'll also open up opportunities for you to kind of bring up things that maybe you're wondering about. Oh, I saw something on the news the other day, or I'm watching this new show and they're talking about this. Have you ever, thought about that? Or have you heard anything about that? So it allows for you to have experiences with your children and talk about the things that they need. And then the other biggest piece is take care of yourself. If you want your child to learn how to take care of their mental health, be the good example. If you're struggling, get the mental health help. If you're having anxiety or virtual fatigue, demonstrate for them how you cope with that in a healthy way, because you're going to be their best advocate and you're going to be their best teachers. And as long as you're taking care of yourself, you're definitely going to be helping your child.
those are great reminders. You actually reminded me, and you were talking about the one-on-one time with kids. One of my friends, she has a 5-year-old, and she was telling me how she notices when she is actually, like, when her mom is talking to her, that real one-on-one connection versus, when you're doing 5 other things and only half talking to them. So, I mean, she's
Yeah.
5 and she will, say, Mom, can we go somewhere and talk? So I think it really does make a difference to engage with them like that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Just because everyone is home together does not mean that you are spending quality time.
Mm.
Just because we're all in the same house does not mean that these moments are as meaningful as when I pull you to the side and say, hey, it's just me and you.
Yeah, I like that. Is there anything else you want to add before I jump over to the questions?
I think I think we covered quite a bit tonight.
Yes, I think we did. I see one from Charlie, and she is wondering, when working with a child, how do you measure success or progress?
A lot of times it's a threefold. What am I seeing? How are they responding to some of the activities that I'm doing with them? If I'm playing a game with a child, and they aren't rushing me or being ugly when they win or ugly when they lose, then okay, I can recognize that we have learned some new social skills, and I see that in them. But then also, parents are going to let me know, oh, you know what? I haven't had as many crying spells, or they haven't had the anger outbursts aren't as intense. So we're going to have some feedback from the parents as well. And then, of course, the child's going to tell me, do I feel better? Do you feel better? Yes, I do. Or I really think I can handle my anxiety now. Or I don't think I have blown up as often. So it's really threefold. It's all of us involved in the therapy, because we're all going to have a different experience. I've definitely felt like one of my kids is making all this progress, so we're doing great, and then the parents like, well, I guess, like, I don't know.
Right.
And so, it's definitely, we're all going to have a different experience, and we're all going to be looking for different things too. So I think that that's also another piece that is in play, is that I may be looking for one thing while the parent may be looking for something else. And so that kind of comes into a piece that's called treatment planning, and making sure that we're all on the same page and we're looking for the same things.
That makes sense, to be like how important it is for all of you to be on the same page, the parents, the kids, all of that. Manuela actually makes a good point that I'm sure many parents have been told before. She said her kid has told her, put your phone down. I think that's a good reminder that we're probably on our phone way more than we should be. So our kids notice, and then they're going to do the same thing we're doing.
Absolutely.
So I think that's all we have. I don't see anything else in the audience. Tanya, thank you for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And I think all of the things you shared with us are tools and tips that we can all take and share with either our kids or people we know. So thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and remind you that we'll be back next Thursday at 7 o'clock. And we're actually going to be doing our first Facebook Live in Spanish. So it's going to be all about mental health, but it'll be in Spanish. So thank you all again for joining us tonight, and have a good evening.